Arrival on the mysterious planet Arethys. The transport shuttle hummed softly as it sliced through the atmosphere of Arethys, a planet glowing under two suns and dotted with endless stretches of vibrant flora. Captain Cade Wells, an Earthborn officer part of the Human Arethysian Exchange Initiative, sat by the window, eyes wide with wonder. His gaze drifted over lush forests, their hues shifting from emerald green to midnight blue under the fading light of one sun, while the other cast a golden glow on crystalline rivers and colossal stone formations scattered across the landscape. Kay was no stranger to alien worlds. As a seasoned member of the Earth Intergalactic Expeditionary Corps, he had seen his fair share of exotic landscapes and eccentric cultures. But Arethys was different. This was a world where emotions were palpable, an air that thrummed with the collective emotional frequency of its inhabitants. Here, feelings weren't hidden behind stoic masks or carefully crafted words. The Arethysians could sense and interpret emotions like a sixth sense, a skill woven into their very beings. Kay felt a prickle of nerves climb up his spine at the thought of being around people who could perceive his every mood, a stark contrast to his life on Earth, where he guarded his emotions carefully. As the shuttle touched down with a light jolt, Kay braced himself, the reality of this new world settling heavily within him. He was here to represent humanity, to build a bridge between two species that had only recently made contact. His mind, however, was racing with thoughts of his new Arethysian roommate, a female named Nara. The rumors among the course about her people's sensitivity to emotions had both intrigued and unnerved him. With a quick intake of breath, Cade straightened his posture, preparing to disembark. The shuttle door hissed open, revealing the bustling Arethysian port. Waves of sweet, earthy fragrances wafted through the air, blending with the crispness of the atmosphere. The Arethysians moved through the crowd with an effortless grace, their blue-toned skin glistening slightly under the twin suns. Cade followed his assigned guide, a gentle Arethysian with the unmistakable glow of curiosity. "They're sensing your emotions," the guide remarked, casting a sideways glance at him with a slight smile. "The new arrivals often bring waves of excitement. You're more of a curiosity than you might imagine." Cade nodded, offering a small, tight smile as they moved deeper into the city. Every glance from the Arethysians made him hyper-aware of his own thoughts and feelings, as though they were laid bare before a collective audience. Trying to maintain his composure, he adjusted the earth-made jacket that suddenly felt too formal, too rigid compared to the flowing fabrics of the Arethysians. Their clothing seemed to mirror the natural landscape, with soft, blended hues and materials that shifted in the light, while Kay felt like a clunky interloper in his practical military wear. Finally, they reached a round, luminous structure nestled within a grove of towering trees. The walls seemed to pulse slightly, blending in seamlessly with the vines and roots surrounding it. The guide gestured toward the entrance, where a tall figure awaited him. "This is where you'll be staying," the guide said with a nod. "Nara is waiting to welcome you." Cade's heart skipped a beat as he stepped forward, pausing when he saw her. Nara was breathtaking in an otherworldly way. Her skin was a silvery blue that seemed to shimmer with each slight movement. Her dark eyes, deep as the night sky on Earth, held a quiet intensity, as if she could see beyond appearances and directly into his mind. Her gaze lingered on him for a heartbeat longer than comfortable, causing a jolt of self-consciousness to creep into Cade's chest. "Welcome, Cade Wells," she said, her voice low and melodic, carrying a calm that felt soothing, yet slightly unsettling. "Your journey must have been long. I hope you find Arethys a place of comfort and learning." Cade swallowed, nodding in response, feeling a slight blush rise in his cheeks. "Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to it." His voice sounded more uncertain than he intended, and he saw a flicker of curiosity light up her eyes, confirming his suspicion that she could sense his trepidation. Nara gestured for him to follow her into the dwelling. The interior was surprisingly warm, filled with soft lighting and an organic design that felt both futuristic and ancient. The walls curved gracefully, appearing almost as if they were grown rather than built. In the center of the room stood a sleek, low table set near a sprawling window that showcased a stunning view of the surrounding forest. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Nara said, her voice gentle, carrying a hint of amusement as she watched Cade's uncertain movements. Cade took a seat, trying to maintain his composure despite the strangeness of the situation. He could feel the air shift slightly, almost as if it were alive and responding to his mood. His eyes flicked toward Nara, catching a momentary smirk at the corner of her mouth before it vanished, replaced by her calm, serene expression. Sitting across from him, Nara met his gaze. "I can feel you're anxious," she said, her tone neither accusatory nor judging, but simply observant. Adjusting to a new culture, especially one where emotions are visible, is never easy. Cade blinked, taken aback by her bluntness. "You could say that," he managed, letting out a nervous chuckle. "It's just, I didn't expect it to be so immediate. I mean, I'm used to keeping my thoughts to myself." Nara's expression softened and she nodded. "It's a common challenge for your kind. But I believe you'll find that, with time, the transparency can be a comfort rather than a burden." They spent the rest of the evening discussing their shared routines, customs, and what it meant to coexist in such close quarters. Cade was fascinated by the way Nara described Arethisian customs, particularly their belief in emotional harmony. It was a concept foreign to him. On Earth, emotions were often private, concealed. Here, emotions were celebrated and shared openly, a natural language beyond words. As the conversation wore on, Cade found himself growing more comfortable with Nara. Her calm presence seemed to settle his nerves, soothing the jagged edges of his discomfort. There was a strange familiarity between them, despite the cultural divide, a silent understanding that went beyond words. By the time night had fallen, casting deep indigo shadows across the room, Cade felt a cautious optimism budding within him. Nara rose from her seat, a soft smile bracing her lips. "It's late. We both have a long day tomorrow. Rest well, Cade. I look forward to learning from you." Cade returned her smile, feeling a warmth settle in his chest that he couldn't quite explain. "Thank you, Nara. I appreciate the welcome." As he retreated to his room, Cade's mind swirled with thoughts of his new home and his new roommate. There was something intriguing about Nara, something about the way she seemed to understand him without words. He couldn't help but feel that this exchange was about far more than cultural diplomacy. It was about discovering something within himself that he had never dared explore. And as he lay in bed, staring up at the soft, glowing ceiling, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that his journey on Arethis was only just beginning. An unexpected encounter. The twin suns of Arethis cast their warm morning light through the large windows of Cade's room, awakening him to a world so different from his own. The air held a fragrance he could only describe as otherworldly, a blend of earthy notes and a subtle floral undertone that tickled his senses, reminding him yet again how far he was from Earth. He took a deep breath, soaking in the moment, the surreal realization sinking in. He was on a planet light years away, in a house with an alien who could read his emotions as clearly as humans could read a facial expression. Cade prepared for his day, moving through the motions of an unfamiliar routine. The shower water was cooler than he was used to, leaving a refreshing chill across his skin that sharpened his senses. Dressed and alert, he stepped out of his room with a sense of purpose, eager to embrace the challenges ahead. Today, he and Nara were scheduled to begin a series of cultural lessons designed to deepen their understanding of each other's worlds, a primary focus of the Human Arethisian Exchange Initiative. He made his way into the central living area and noticed Nara seated by the floor-to-ceiling window. She seemed deep in thought, her gaze fixed on the sprawling landscape beyond. The vibrant forest shimmered under the sun, and Cade marveled at how the trees seemed to sway in time with a rhythm he couldn't hear, but could almost feel, a gentle pulse, as if the entire planet were alive and breathing with them. Nara turned as he approached, her dark, deep-set eyes meeting his. A soft smile played on her lips, and Cade felt an unspoken connection stir between them. "Good morning, Cade," she greeted, her voice as calm and melodic as ever. "Did you rest well?" He nodded, chuckling. "Better than I expected, actually. This planet, it's like nothing I've ever experienced." She smiled wider, almost as if his reaction amused her. Arethys has that effect. Many visitors find it different, sometimes overwhelming. But I'm glad it's beginning to feel comfortable to you. Kay noticed the softness in her gaze, a kind of calm he couldn't quite place. It was almost as if she could sense his underlying curiosity and the blend of excitement and nerves bubbling within him. And maybe she could. There was no hiding from someone who could interpret emotions as naturally as breathing. Nara gestured toward a cushion beside her. "Before we begin our lessons, would you join me for a morning practice we have here on Arethys?" Her question held a gentle invitation, almost an encouragement. Intrigued, Cade nodded and took a seat across from her. Nara closed her eyes and took a slow, deep breath, her movements serene and purposeful. He tried to mirror her actions, closing his eyes and attempting to clear his mind, but found his thoughts racing, thoughts of Earth, his mission, and, unexpectedly, of Nara herself. After a few minutes, Cade opened one eye, only to see Nara observing him with a faint smile, her amusement visible in the slight lift of her eyebrows. "Your thoughts are very active, Cade," she said, her tone warm yet lightly teasing. "Arethysians practice this to align ourselves with our surroundings, to let our emotions flow freely rather than keep them constrained." Cade exhaled, feeling slightly sheepish. "It's challenging to quiet everything," he admitted. "On Earth, we're taught to keep emotions private, controlled. This is different." Nara nodded, her expression understanding. "That's precisely what makes it worthwhile. In our culture, openness with emotions allows for greater understanding and trust. Perhaps with time, you'll come to appreciate it as we do." Her words resonated with him, striking a chord he didn't fully understand. There was something liberating in the idea of not having to hide his feelings, of living in a place where authenticity wasn't a choice, but a way of life. He wondered if he'd ever truly be able to adapt to this aspect of Arethysian culture. As they finished their morning practice, Nara rose and moved toward the kitchen area, retrieving two small translucent cups filled with a vibrant purple liquid. She offered one to him, her expression encouraging. "It's a traditional Arethysian drink called fervor. It helps center the mind and heightens awareness." "Our first cultural lesson of the day," she said with a playful glint in her eyes. Kay took a sip, surprised at the drink's refreshing, slightly tangy taste. He could feel a subtle warmth spread through his body, the drink leaving a faint floral aftertaste on his tongue. It was unlike anything he'd tasted, and he could sense its calming effect almost immediately. This is good," he said, smiling. Nara raised her cup in acknowledgement, taking a sip as well. "I thought you might enjoy it. There is a certain harmony in sharing food and drink, a sentiment we hold dear on Arethys." Their morning continued with Nara explaining various aspects of Arethysian culture, from their deep connection to nature to their emphasis on collective harmony. As Kay listened, he began to realize how much his world differed. On Earth, life often felt fragmented, isolated, and individualistic. Here, everything flowed together as part of a larger whole. Nara's explanations were captivating, her insights weaving a complex picture of Arethysian society that left Cade both intrigued and slightly envious. As they delved deeper into the customs of her people, Nara explained a practice that caught him off guard. "On Arethys, physical boundaries are different from yours. Our gestures of trust and understanding involve a closeness that may be unusual for you. For instance, sharing a touch or a glance is our way of establishing a connection." Kay felt his heart skip at her words. Despite her composed demeanor, he noticed a faint hesitation in her eyes, a subtle vulnerability he hadn't seen before. Just as he was about to respond, the moment was interrupted by a chime that echoed softly through the room. Nara turned toward the door, and as it slid open, an elder Arethysian entered, his figure tall and lean, his skin a slightly deeper shade of blue. Nara rose and greeted him with a respectful nod, gesturing for Cade to do the same. "This is Elder Rolf," she explained, "one of our city's most esteemed wisdom keepers. He wanted to personally welcome you, Cade." Cade felt a rush of awe and nerves, quickly straightening to greet the elder. Rath's presence was commanding, yet there was a gentleness in his gaze. "Welcome to Arethys, Cade Wells," the elder said, his voice a soothing baritone. "It is rare for us to open our hearts to an outsider, but I sense in you a spirit that seeks to understand." Cade managed a respectful nod. "Thank you, Elder Roth. I am honored to be here and look forward to learning from your people." The elder smiled, his eyes carrying a knowing glint. "Ah, but I believe you have already started," he said, casting a meaningful glance at Nara. Cade felt a warm flush creep up his neck, the elder's perceptiveness catching him off guard. Ruff placed a hand on Cade's shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm. "There is much to learn, Cade, but remember this. Understanding is not found only in the mind, but in the heart. Let yourself feel, experience, and allow Arethys to show you its truths." With that, Elder Rolf offered a parting nod to both Cade and Nara, then left as quietly as he'd entered, leaving an air of reverence in his wake. Cade felt the weight of the elder's words, his mind swirling with questions he couldn't yet articulate. As he turned to Nara, she offered him a soft smile, as if sensing his thoughts. "The elders have a way of seeing beyond appearances. Ruff wanted to remind you that your presence here isn't just about observing, but about connecting." Cade nodded, feeling the impact of her words. "I think I understand, at least I'm starting to." They shared a lingering gaze, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Nara's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, he thought he caught a glimpse of something more in her gaze, an emotion that mirrored his own curiosity, his own uncertainty, and perhaps even his growing admiration. And as they stood there, under the gentle light of the Arethysian suns filtering through the window, Cade felt a strange sense of belonging take root in his heart. He wasn't sure where this path would lead, but with Nara by his side, he was ready to find out. Crossing boundaries. The days on Arethys had a rhythm of their own, a gentle flow that felt almost hypnotic. The twin suns cast their golden light over lush landscapes, marking the passage of time in a way that was softer, more fluid than Cade was used to. The air seemed to hum with life, carrying with it the faintest echoes of laughter and song from distant parts of the city. The more he adjusted to life here, the more Cade felt a part of this world, even though it still held countless mysteries. Cade's lessons with Nara had continued, each day offering deeper insights into the Arethysian way of life. By now, their initial awkwardness had faded into a comfortable companionship, but today was different. Nara seemed preoccupied, her gaze often drifting toward the window, as if lost in thoughts she didn't want to share. Cade's curiosity piqued, though he tried not to pry. Late in the afternoon, Nara suggested they take a walk beyond the city center to a place known as the Solin Gardens. Cade agreed readily, eager to see more of this enchanting world. As they walked through the winding streets, he noticed the shift in the architecture. The buildings grew smaller, more organic, melding seamlessly with the trees and flora. It was as though they were stepping back in time, moving into a realm untouched by the fast-paced march of progress that he knew on Earth. The Solin Gardens were like nothing Cade had ever seen. Towering trees, with trunks wide enough to fit entire rooms within, formed a natural cathedral above them, their branches arching overhead like a protective canopy. Strange, luminescent plants dotted the forest floor, their soft glow illuminating the path as they walked deeper into the grove. Small streams wove between rocks, their waters crystal clear and tinged with a faint silvery sheen. Nara led him to a secluded area by one of the streams and gestured for him to sit beside her on a smooth, weathered stone. The coolness of the rocks seeped through his clothing, grounding him in the present moment. For a while, they simply sat in silence, listening to the gentle flow of water and the distant calls of Arethysian fauna. Kay felt an odd sense of peace settle over him, a feeling he couldn't quite explain but welcomed all the same. Arethisians come here to reflect and reconnect with the essence of our world, Nara said softly, her voice blending seamlessly with the sounds of nature around them. The energy of this place is very old. It holds memories, emotions, experiences that stretch back beyond even our recorded history. Kay glanced at her, intrigued. It feels alive, as if the trees themselves are watching over us. Nara turned to him, her eyes glimmering with something between amusement and understanding. They are. Our ancestors believed that everything on Arethis carries its own spirit. Trees, rivers, even the stones beneath us have their own form of life. We are all connected. Her words resonated with Cabe on a level he didn't expect. Earth, in many ways, had lost that reverence for nature. Forests were cleared, rivers were dammed, all in the name of progress. But here, it was different. The Arethisians didn't just exist in their world, they seemed to be a part of it, intertwined with every living thing. For a moment, Kay felt a pang of homesickness, mingled with a strange yearning he couldn't quite place. I envy that connection, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Back on Earth, we've lost that sense of unity with nature. Sometimes it feels like we're strangers in our own world. Nara regarded him with a thoughtful expression, her gaze softening. Perhaps in being here, you're meant to rediscover that part of yourself, to realize that there is no division between you and the world around you. Kay let her words sink in, feeling them settle like stones in his chest. It was a profound idea, one he had never fully considered. But as he looked around the Soling Gardens, he felt the truth of it in every fiber of his being. He reached down, trailing his fingers through the water of the nearby stream, watching as ripples spread outward, distorting his reflection. Without thinking, he glanced over at Nara. "Do you come here often?" She hesitated, her eyes drifting away. "Yes, though I usually come alone. This place holds memories for me, both comforting and painful." Cade sensed the weight in her voice, a hint of vulnerability she rarely showed. "You don't have to share if you don't want to," he said gently, respecting her space. Nara took a deep breath, seeming to gather her thoughts. "When I was younger, I would come here with my brother. We were very close. He passed away many years ago, but when I come here, it's as if a part of him is still with me. In Arethisian belief, this place keeps his memory alive." Cade's heart ached at her words, and he felt a pull to comfort her. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Nara. I can't imagine that kind of loss." To his surprise, Nara didn't flinch at his touch. Instead, she placed her hand over his, a faint, almost invisible glow pulsing from her skin as their hands met. He felt a warmth spread through him, a subtle hum that was both comforting and electric. The Arethisian's ability to sense emotions was something he was still getting used to, but this was different, more personal, more intimate. They sat in silence for a moment, their hands entwined, an unspoken connection flowing between them. Kay didn't fully understand it, but he didn't need to. He simply let the moment be, allowing himself to feel without questioning or overthinking. After a while, Nara withdrew her hand, her gaze lingering on him. "Thank you, Cade, for listening. It's rare for me to share that part of myself." Cade nodded, his own voice quiet. "It's an honor, Nara. I think that's what this whole experience is teaching me, to be open, to let people in." Nara's eyes softened, and she gave him a faint smile. "You are learning quickly." The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden. They rose to leave, and as they walked back toward the city, Cade felt a shift in their dynamic. There was a new closeness between them, something that went beyond words, beyond the boundaries of their worlds. For the first time, he felt not just as a guest on Arethis, but as someone who belonged. As they neared the city's edge, Nara stopped suddenly, glancing over at him with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "There's one more thing I'd like to show you, if you're up for it." Cabe raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Lead the way." She guided him to a hill overlooking the city, a place that offered a breathtaking view of the skyline. As the sun set, the entire city was bathed in shades of indigo and silver, the buildings glowing softly under the fading light. Cade felt his breath catch, the beauty of the scene leaving him speechless. Nara gestured toward a small stone structure at the top of the hill, adorned with Arethesian symbols carved intricately into its surface. "This is a place of renewal," she explained. "An ancient shrine where we come to release burdens, to let go of past hurts, and to embrace new beginnings." Cade felt the weight of her words and sensed that she wasn't just inviting him to look, but to participate. Together, they approached the shrine, and Nara reached out, tracing a symbol with her fingers. She then gestured for him to do the same. As Cade touched the cool stone, he felt a strange sensation, as if the worries he carried, the doubts, the fears, the memories of home, were being gently lifted, absorbed by the shrine itself. He looked over at Nara, her eyes closed, a serene expression on her face, and felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. They stood together in silence, facing the city, the shrine a quiet presence behind them. In that moment, Cade realized that he was beginning to find a sense of peace here, a belonging that went beyond his role as an ambassador. He was becoming part of something larger, something timeless. Turning to Nara, he offered her a soft smile, feeling more open, more honest than he'd ever been. "Thank you for today, Nara. I think I needed this." Nara returned his smile, her gaze warm and steady. "You're welcome, Cade. I'm glad you're here." And as the stars began to prick through the night sky, Cade felt a profound shift within himself, a newfound sense of connection not just to this world, but to the person standing beside him. Boundaries blurred. As the days blended together, Cade found himself growing ever more attuned to the pulse of Arethis. The planet's lush landscapes and the quiet hum of life around him felt almost symbiotic, welcoming him in a way that was becoming strangely familiar. What began as a diplomatic mission now felt like a journey into the depths of himself, his heart and mind unfolding with each passing day. And it was Nara, his enigmatic Arethesian roommate, who had become his guide, his anchor, and, to his surprise, his closest confidant. One evening, Nara invited Cade to attend a festival in the heart of the city, a rare event that celebrated the Arethesian tradition of Wyran, a ceremony of emotional resonance. It was a chance for the Arethesians to honor their deepest emotions, a ritual of vulnerability and shared connection. Cade was both curious and apprehensive. The notion of being part of an event where emotions were laid bare was as foreign as the planet itself, but Nara's quiet encouragement emboldened him. The festival was held in a vast open square surrounded by the organic, flowing architecture that defined Arethis. Towers of light rose up around the square, casting a gentle glow over the gathering crowd. Arethesians of all ages moved gracefully, their robes flowing like water in colors of deep purples, blues, and silvers. Each person wore an expression of reverent calm, anticipation, and openness, a harmony that contrasted with Cade's internal turbulence. Nara, sensing his tension, placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Wuran is a time to let go of restraint," she murmured, her voice soothing. "Here, you can be open. There's no judgment, only acceptance." Cade nodded, swallowing the hesitation that clung to him. He was dressed in a borrowed Arethesian robe, its silken fabric a shade of green that shimmered under the moonlight. Though he felt out of place among the serene Arethesians, he also felt a quiet thrill, as though he were on the verge of something monumental. With Nara at his side, he felt ready to face its unknown. The ceremony began with a soft hum, a low, resonant sound that grew as more voices joined. It wasn't a song in the traditional sense. It was more like an expression of feeling that reverberated through the square, a vibration that Cade could feel in his bones. The Arethesians had a way of connecting beyond words, their voices blending into one harmonious current. The sound grew, washing over him, and for the first time, he allowed himself to release the iron grip he held on his emotions. As the ritual continued, Nera stood beside him, her eyes closed, her face softened in a look of peace and vulnerability. Cade watched her, mesmerized by the openness etched in her expression. Her presence was grounding, and yet he felt a growing current of something else, a warmth, a yearning that he could no longer deny. In that moment, it was as though the barriers between them were as fragile as mist, waiting to be dissolved. Without thinking, Cade reached out and took her hand. Her eyes opened, her gaze meeting his with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, a flicker of shared emotion that neither of them could ignore. He felt a surge of connection unlike anything he'd experienced before. It was more than just attraction. It was a profound sense of recognition, as if he'd known her far longer than the brief weeks they had shared. The ceremony continued around them, but in that instant, the world seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them standing in the center of their own private universe. Nara didn't pull away. Instead, she tightened her grip on his hand, her eyes shining with an intensity that took his breath away. Cade felt as if he was standing at the edge of a precipice, his heart pounding with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. A soft tremor in Nara's voice broke the silence between them. "Cade, Arethisians don't usually connect with others in this way. To touch, to feel so openly. This is rare, even for us." Kay felt a rush of understanding, realizing the depth of her trust. "Then why? Why are you letting me?" She took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "Because there is something about you, Cade, something that resonates within me." Her cheeks flushed with a faint blue, a sign of Arethisian vulnerability he was coming to recognize. "You are unlike anyone I have known, earthborn or otherwise." Cade's hand moved instinctively, brushing a stray strand of her silvery hair behind her ear. He felt her breath catch, her eyes widening at the intimacy of the gesture. Their faces were close now, closer than ever before, and he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, the subtle hum of energy that was uniquely Arethisian. But before either of them could speak, the festival crowd around them began to move, shifting as the next stage of the ceremony unfolded. Cade and Nara stepped back, their hands reluctantly parting. Despite the interruption, the air between them was charged, an unspoken promise hanging in the space they had just shared. The ritual continued into the night, each stage of the ceremony revealing different facets of Arethisian emotion. There were moments of laughter, others of sullen reflection, but always a sense of unity, a collective heartbeat that bound the people together. Cade was entranced, swept along by the currents of feeling that pulsed through the gathering. And through it all, his gaze kept drifting back to Nara, her presence a constant, steadying force that he found himself increasingly drawn to. As the ceremony neared its end, Nara gestured for him to follow her to a secluded part of the square, away from the throngs of people. They stood in the shadows of a tall, spiral-shaped monument, its silvery surface reflecting the starlight. Kay could feel the gravity of the moment, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them. Nara's voice was a whisper, barely audible above the distant hum of the festival. "Cade, I don't understand this connection. It defies the logic I was raised with, the traditions of my people, but I can't ignore it." He took a step closer, his own voice thick with emotion. "I can't either, Nara. Whatever this is, it feels bigger than both of us." She closed her eyes, taking a slow, steadying breath before meeting his gaze. "I must warn you, Cade. Arethisians do not give their hearts easily. Once we form a bond, it is a connection that cannot be undone." He reached out, gently cradling her face in his hands. "I don't want to undo it. I don't know where this path leads, but I know I want to walk it with you." Her hands found their way to his, covering them as if to anchor herself in the moment. The air between them was electric, a tangible tension that both exhilarated and terrified him. For a heartbeat, everything was silent, the hum of the festival, the world around them, all faded, leaving only the two of them, suspended in a moment that felt timeless. Slowly, as if testing the boundary of a fragile new world, Nara leaned in, her lips brushing softly against his. The kiss was tentative at first, a whisper of connection, but it deepened quickly, a flood of emotion that seemed to pour from both of them. Cade felt the weight of her presence, the rawness of her emotions, and he knew that this was more than just attraction. It was a merging of two souls, an undeniable resonance that went beyond words. When they finally parted, their foreheads rested together, their breaths mingling in the cool night air. Nara's hand lingered on his chest over his heart, as if to feel the beat beneath. "Whatever lies ahead," she murmured, "I am willing to face it with you, Cade." He smiled, his voice soft but certain. "Then let's face it together." They returned to the crowd, their connection a silent, powerful current between them, an unbreakable bond forged in the heart of the Arethysian night. And as they stood side by side, watching the last moments of the Wyron Festival, Cade knew that his life had been irrevocably changed. He had crossed a boundary he didn't fully understand, but it was a boundary he was willing to explore, step by step, with Nara by his side. In the days that followed, the world seemed brighter, filled with a sense of purpose and belonging that he hadn't known before. And as he and Nara continued their journey together, each discovery, each shared glance, each lingering touch only deepened the connection they had forged under the starlit sky of Arethys. Uncharted territory. The days following the Wyron Festival felt like a dream, and yet, for Cade, the connection he shared with Nara was more real than anything he'd ever experienced. Their bond was unspoken yet unmistakable, weaving itself into every glance, every shared silence, and every accidental touch. Even as he threw himself into his duties and continued learning about Arethysian culture, his mind was never far from Nara. Each evening, as twin moons rose over the silver-hued landscape, they found themselves drawn to the secluded edges of the city, where the quiet forests and glistening rivers offered them a refuge. It was during these stolen moments that Cade began to feel the weight of the questions lingering between them, questions about what they were becoming, what this bond truly meant, and where it would lead. One night, while they sat beneath the canopy of a towering tree, its leaves glowing faintly in the moonlight, Nara turned to him, her gaze searching. "Cade, you must understand that what we have, this connection, it's unprecedented for my people. I've never..." She hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "We do not form bonds easily with those beyond our kind." Cade took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles over her skin, feeling the warmth radiating from her. "I don't fully understand it either, Nara, but I know that it's real. I feel it, in ways I never thought possible." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "There is something else I need to share, Cade. Among the Arethysians, bonds are more than emotional connections. When two Arethysians choose one another in this way, their energies merge. It's a lifelong bond, and it cannot be broken." Her words hung heavily in the air, a weight that pressed into the silence. Cade's heart pounded, understanding the gravity of what she was telling him. This wasn't just a fleeting connection, a passing infatuation. It was a commitment, a merging of souls that went beyond anything he'd ever encountered. Cade tightened his grip on her hand. "Nara, if this is a choice, it's one I'm willing to make." She looked up, her eyes glimmering with both fear and something he recognized as hope. "You must be certain. The bond will not be easy. Our lives are different, our worlds." She trailed off, the unspoken concerns in her eyes reminding him of the obstacles that lay between them. But Cade's mind was clear. "I came here as a stranger, a representative of Earth, expecting to observe and learn. But now, I can't imagine my life without you, Nara. I know it sounds impulsive, but this, whatever we have, feels right." A soft, relieved smile spread across her face, her hand tightening in his. "Then I will trust in it too." They fell into silence, the enormity of their decision settling over them like the gentle fall of rain. For a long time, they sat together under the stars, their thoughts interwoven in a quiet reverie. The world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of their breaths, the warmth of their bodies close, and the unbreakable thread of understanding that bound them. In the days that followed, Kay became increasingly aware of how the bond with Nara altered his perception of Arethys and its people. The streets he once wandered as a curious outsider now felt familiar, as if he belonged. The Arethysian buildings, their flowing, organic architecture, seemed to mirror the interconnectedness of everything here. Even the soft hum in the air, the same one he felt since arriving, seemed clearer, more defined, resonating with an energy that felt deeply personal. One evening, Nara invited him to a quiet, hidden place within the Soling Gardens. They walked in silence, the familiarity between them replacing the need for words. As they moved deeper into the grove, Nara paused by a narrow path that led up a small incline shrouded by dense foliage. She gestured for him to follow, and as they climbed, he felt a peculiar shift in the air, as if the very atmosphere held its breath. At the summit, a breathtaking scene awaited them. A crystal-clear lake lay nestled between rocky cliffs, its waters shimmering with a luminescent glow. The lake's surface was so still that it mirrored the twin moons and the star-speckled sky above, creating the illusion of an infinite expanse. Kate stood speechless, taking in the surreal beauty of the place. Nara stepped beside him, her voice soft. "This is the Lake of Reflections. It's said that those who come here can see their truest selves, revealed in the reflection." She knelt by the water's edge, her eyes thoughtful. On Arethys, this lake is sacred. It is a place of truth, where Arethysians come to seek clarity when they are uncertain. She looked up at him, her gaze penetrating. "Cade, I brought you here because if we are to bond, if we are to be together, it's essential that we see ourselves clearly, beyond what we want or feel." Kay felt the weight of her words and the significance of the lake before him. It wasn't just a place for introspection. It was a gateway to understanding themselves, to confronting whatever lay beneath the surface. He joined her by the water, gazing at their reflections, two figures side by side, human and Arethysian, joined in a way that defied the boundaries of their worlds. For a long time, they sat in silence, and Cade felt his mind drifting, memories and emotions bubbling to the surface. He saw flashes of his life on Earth, moments of joy and sorrow, doubts he'd buried, and dreams he'd long forgotten. All of it seemed to swirl together, melding into a singular awareness of who he was, stripped bare. As he looked at his reflection, he felt Nera's presence beside him, a steady warmth that calmed his mind. She had her own reflection to face, her own questions to confront, yet she stayed close, anchoring him. He realized, in that moment, how much he depended on her presence, how integral she had become to his life in such a short time. When they finally rose from the lake, Cade felt lighter, as if he had left a part of his past behind in the water's depths. Nara's expression was serene, her gaze holding a newfound determination. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with a quiet conviction. "The lake shows us what we need to release and what we need to embrace, but it's up to us to take the path forward." Cade nodded, his own heart filled with certainty. "Then let's take it together." As they made their way back to the city, Kay felt an unbreakable resolve within him. The obstacles they faced were real, and the journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he was sure of his place on Arethys, and more than that, of the person he wanted to be here with. The following morning, Cade and Nara woke early, determined to begin a new chapter in their journey. Together, they ventured into the heart of the Arethysian wilderness, seeking out the blessings of an elder who lived far from the city, a shaman of sorts, renowned for his wisdom in matters of bonding and unity. The journey was arduous, winding through dense forests and across rocky terrain, but the hardships only strengthened their resolve. They traveled in comfortable silence, the bond between them deepening with each step. Every glance, every shared smile, felt like an unspoken promise. At dusk, they arrived at a hidden glade where the elder resided, his small stone dwelling nestled under a canopy of ancient trees. The elder, a astute figure with eyes that gleamed like embers, greeted them with a knowing smile, as if he'd been expecting them. "You have come seeking a bond," the elder said, his voice raspy yet filled with warmth. "But remember, the bond you seek must be earned, and it will demand more than just your love. It will demand your patience, your trust, and your strength." Cade nodded, understanding the gravity of the elder's words. "We're ready to face whatever is required." The elder led them through a ritual that spanned the night, involving ancient chants and symbolic gestures, each step designed to align their energies, to prepare them for the journey of union. They shared their fears, their hopes, their dreams, and in that space, under the elder's watchful eye, they laid bare their souls. As dawn approached, the elder placed his hands on their joined hands, his gaze solemn. "Your bond is sealed in the eyes of Arethys. May your journey be one of unity and strength as you walk together in harmony." When the ritual ended, Cade and Nara felt a profound shift within them, a sense of completion, of being bound not just by choice, but by something far deeper, something eternal. The bond they shared was now part of the fabric of Arethys, a connection that transcended time, place, and understanding. As they left the glade and began the journey back to the city, Kay felt as if he was seeing the world through new eyes. Colors were brighter, sounds sharper, and Nara's presence beside him felt like a pulse in his own heart. They were united now, two souls intertwined, each stronger for the bond they had chosen. And as they walked hand in hand, their path illuminated by the soft light of the rising sun, Cade knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, forever bound by the love and courage that had brought them to this moment.